My career ended very abruptly, and I went from making money to not making money overnight. Thankfully, I didn't have to go get a job. And a lot of my friends when that happened, were put into survival mode. You need to start planning for the future while your career's still on the way up. Don't wait until it starts heading towards a downturn to go, oh my gosh, I need to start planning.
Welcome to the Rental Property Owner and Real Estate Investor Podcast, brought to you by the Rental Property Owner Association, providing benefits and services to real estate investors and rental property owners for over 48 years. With your host, Brian Hamrick from Hamrick Investment Group.
This episode is sponsored by Green Property Management, managing everything from single-family homes to apartment complexes in the West Michigan area. Find out more at greenpropertymgt.com. Hello and welcome to episode 208. Mikey Taylor was one of the most recognizable pro skateboarders on the planet. And in his 2 decades of professional skateboarding, he had lucrative sponsorship contracts, merchandise, and 7 pro model shoes. So why would he leave that behind to become a real estate investor? And what is it about the skateboarding world that has prepared him to become an entrepreneur and principal at Commune Capital, where he's committed to assisting the next generation to find the new American dream? Well, today we're going to find that out. Mikey, welcome to the show.
Oh, thanks for having me. Pleasure.
So, famous skateboarder. Tell us a little bit about that. I'm really interested to know how that transitioned you into real estate investing.
Yeah, it's not the normal trajectory for a skater. I started skateboarding when I was 13. I saw a friend with a skateboard who I thought was cool, so I picked it up to try to fit in. And it was just the one thing that completely took control of my life. I ended up doing it all day, every day for the next 3 years, and until my parents started pressuring me to get a job and to try to combat having to get a job, which meant I couldn't skate as much. I came up with this plan and convinced my parents that if I could get sponsors and get free product, then that would be enough to not have to get a job. They agreed to it, I think, because they thought it was so crazy. And I went out and tried to get sponsors. I ended up getting a shoe sponsor, a clothing sponsor, a skateboard sponsor. And that ultimately bought me 2 more years until I was going to graduate. And, my parents, along with myself, always planned on me going to college. And, I wasn't totally ready to give up on skating. So I convinced my sponsors to start paying me, which eventually led to me turning pro. And then that was when I was about 19 years old. And then the clock started ticking on what I was going to do when my career ended. And that was my ultimate path of trying to figure out what life was like after being a pro skateboarder.
I'm real curious about the economics of that, being a pro skateboarder, having licensing contracts and merchandise. What kind of money do you make? Is it like rock star kind of money, or is it enough to get by?
That's a great question. And I think that's always a public perception that if you're pro at something or a lot of people know who you are, that you make a ton of money. That is usually not true, especially in skateboarding. So, there's probably 3% of pros that make really, really good money. The rest make enough to get by. I was really fortunate to have landed somewhere in the middle. And so kind of how it looks from a product standpoint. Pro skateboarders make about $2 for every board they sell. There's not that many skateboards. You don't sell that many skateboards. So it actually doesn't end up being anything significantly. Where you make most of your money is with a signature shoe. And that's because, when a shop buys a shoe, they'll buy every size run, possibly duplicates, and then usually will carry all the colorways. So you're just moving so many more units. So if you get to having a signature shoe, that's where you can really start kind of doing damage. And that's kind of was the turning point for me. I made, probably until I got a signature shoe, I was probably making like 70 grand a year. And then I got a signature shoe, and it was, I started getting close to the 200. It's making about 100, probably 170, 160. And then towards the later end of my career, I had a shoe that kind of went off, and I started making pretty good money for about 3 years.
And what is it that makes the shoe so special? Is it your name on it, or are they filling it with gold foam?
Okay, that's such a good question. Truthfully, it comes down to the design. The name is important, but not enough to not sell. There's a guy, Stefan Janowski, who was, he's one of the coolest skateboarders, but not like a Tony Hawk. And he got a signature shoe on Nike that just was the perfect design. And he has now sold more signature skate shoes than anyone in history. He'll never work again because of this one shoe and how it was designed. So I'm a big believer of right design at the right time.
Yeah, well, that's and I'm sure that's probably transitioned to your real estate as well, which we'll get into. But it sounds like it's the shoe. Like whatever sport it is, if you get the shoe, then that's where you start making the big bucks.
That's exactly right. Yeah. So I would say most pro skateboarders will not make $100,000 a year. It's usually somewhere around the 50.
Okay.
And that's before taxes. But that's for a pro athlete, so it's not that much living in California.
Yeah, in California, you're absolutely right. In California, 50 is not that much, but it's pretty good to get paid even that much to do something you love.
Yes, that is true. There is a huge blessing in the fact that we get to enjoy every single day of our lives and get paid to do it. Absolutely.
Now, how many people, sports stars in your position, would actually be thinking along the lines that you were? Because you were thinking during this period, well, what's next? How do I prepare myself for what comes after skateboarding? I mean, is that a unique thought in that world?
Yes, unfortunately. Yes, it is. Dude, for me, I was just frightened of it. I was scared more than anything. I think most people, though, when they're scared of things, they just kind of try to ignore it or pretend it's not going to happen as a coping mechanism. I think that's probably the case with most athletes. It's just I don't even want to think about that because it's dark and scary. For me, I was just so scared it just caused action. But it's unique, unfortunately.
Yeah, it seems like it would be. But you are an entrepreneur at heart, too. So it's not just that you jumped from skateboarding into real estate. You had some businesses along the way. Can you tell us a little bit about those? Yeah.
So, it's funny. I didn't realize what an entrepreneur was till, probably 6 years after I had started my first business. That just wasn't a term that we use in the skate industry. What I saw growing up was all my favorite skaters that I resonated with when I was young were the guys who did more than just skateboarding. So there was a guy, Jamie Thomas, and he was an incredible incredible skateboarder, owned his company, was a filmer. And I remember as a 15-year-old kid seeing that going, oh my gosh, that's so cool that he does all of that. And then, I find out that another guy, Andrew Reynolds, owns his companies. And I always resonated with the guys who own their own things. So once I got to the position of, feeling like I had enough to build my own brand, I took a stab at it and started my first company.
And what was that? What was your first company?
The very first company I started was a company called Black Backpacks, which was a backpack brand. And then from there, it spiraled into a skateboard company, a clothing brand, a management company, a craft brewery, a design company, a media platform. It's definitely, I've tried a lot, and of course not all of it worked, but the very first one was a backpack company.
So like Black Backpack, is that something you had an idea for a black backpack, so you went out and got it manufactured, or did someone bring it to you and you said, yeah, I'll partner with you on that? How did that work for you? So
what happened was, it's funny. My wife, I can't remember. I don't think we were married at the time. I think we were dating, but my wife had a conversation with me and it went something along the lines of like, hey, you don't need to figure it out right now, but I want you to start thinking about taking advantage of your opportunity. And, I think this is a good time to take a stab at starting a company. You've always talked about that. Why don't you just keep your ear out for opportunity or keep your eyes out for opportunity? And she had said that. And then 2 days later, I was out skating with one of my friends who was a photographer, and we both had ridden for this backpack company called OGO. And we were skating, and he was like, "Hey, dude, so what are you going to do for bags now that we don't have OGO?" And he had said something along the lines of, "Yeah, I'm trying to find another sponsor." And I think the conversation that I had with my wife, I just threw it out there, "Dude, screw getting another sponsor. Let's just start a company." And we had no idea what that meant, and that was basically the beginning of us trying to figure out how to do that. And then that spiraled into wanting more. My whole thing is like, I take on more than I know. I take on so much before I even realize what goes into doing them. And that was definitely my problem in the beginning.
So you said, screw it, let's create our own company. How did that then go to let's create the Black Backpack Company?
So, what happened to that is, it's funny how this happened. So we're basically like, hey, let's do Black Backpack. Let's make a backpack company. That probably took about 1.5 years to actually get product and have a business. What happened in the in-between time was starting St. Archer. So we went to start Black Backpacks. Then I started St. Archer, and Black Backpacks, my friend Atiba, who I started it with, he was basically running that as we started building out St. Archer. And then we ended up bringing St. Archer to life before Black Backpacks ever came about. So that's why I say Black Backpacks was technically the first business we started on a piece of paper, but it actually came to fruition after St. Archer did.
And
it probably took 2.5 years after. St. Archer was a craft brewery that we started.
Okay, that's the one that you started, and then you actually sold it and made a pretty decent profit off of it.
We did, yeah. We sold it to Miller Coors.
Nice.
Yeah.
Nice.
Yeah.
So was that the biggest deal you'd done up to that point?
St. Archer was the biggest thing we had done up to that point. Yeah. That was, when we started that, it was me, my friend Paul, who was another pro skateboarder, and my friend Josh, who was a filmmaker. Even though we, on paper, started Black Backpacks, St. Archer was really the first business that we really went for. And so we didn't really know anything up until that point. And we got to, and we had to raise money to do it. So I was fortunate to have a really good team to bring this to help us set everything up, prepare us for what we were doing. And then we basically went for it and had to figure it out along the way.
I'd like to take a moment to tell you about Green Property Management. Not only do they manage everything from single-family homes to apartment complexes in the West Michigan area, they also manage my entire portfolio. So I can tell you from personal experience that their unique flat fee management style is worth a closer look. If you feel that your property isn't operating to its fullest potential, then Green Property Management can help you take a holistic approach that will save you money, eliminate your headaches, and increase your net income. And if you're a property manager interested in applying Green Property Management's model, give them a call at 1-866-95-GREEN or visit them on the web at greenpropertymgt.com. And their first month's management fee will be half off for all new clients who sign up between now and the RPOA's annual conference in February. About that figuring it out along the way, I would imagine that being a professional skateboarder in many ways would not be the background that would prepare you for being an entrepreneur and dealing with the financial aspect and the business aspect. Are there any similarities there or synergies, or did you just have to learn everything from scratch?
That's such a good question. So yes and no. There's things and qualities about skateboarding that I believe really set you up to succeed in the entrepreneurial world, if that's your calling. And for example, starting a business is, and you know this, anyone who listening knows this, it's brutal. It's incredibly hard. It's challenging. Things are constantly going wrong. It feels as if you're going against the grain always. And that is very similar to skating. For what it takes to get good at skating, it is so much more failing than it is succeeding. And for example, like the first trick I ever learned was an ollie. That took me 3 months of trying it every single day until I landed it one time. And then when I wanted to learn how to kickflip, that was another 4 months before I landed at one time. And all the way to me becoming pro and skating on the highest level, when I would go out and film a trick, it would take me 3 hours to land the trick one time. And when we would be trying it, every time we'd mess up, it hurt. It was brutal. It was like we were putting ourselves to the brink of destruction as everything in us and around us is saying stop, and we have to push through that to succeed. And then that actually becomes such a normal process for us that for me stepping into the business world, it was very comforting in the sense of, while everything feels like it's going wrong, that's very comfortable for me to just push through until it succeeds. And it's really this idea that, ultimately what skating has taught me is it's not a question whether I'm going to succeed or not. The only argument is at what time I'm going to, which really lends well in business. The things that skateboarding did not prepare us for was, business in general. It's like having to work with people. That is not something you learn in skateboarding, because skateboarding is such a I or selfish thing. That was a challenge for me. Learning the how would you say it? Learning how businesses move, operate, how you make decisions, setting up any type of legal or operating agreements. That was all we had to learn. That's something that nothing prepares you for unless you do it.
That's such a great breakdown there. The drive and the determination and focus really help prepare you for it. But then then you actually have the actual financial business part that you had to learn.
Oh, totally. And not getting taken advantage of. That was something that, the business world can be cutthroat. And unfortunately, a lot of people will use bad ethics as a mask and just say that's business. And dude, we've lost money not knowing how to set things up to protect ourselves. And there's everything I learned, every single thing I've learned in business has been through just doing it. That's something that I don't even know if school will prepare you for, though. I think doing it prepares you.
Absolutely. So let's transition into real estate now.
Okay.
Because even with the business background and the entrepreneurship and the skateboarding, it does seem like quite a leap to go to becoming a real estate investor. So talk about that.
Okay. So one thing I did not tell you, and then we'll tie this whole thing around. Oh, sorry. Hang on, Brian. We might have to edit this part out, but the dog's going off. Okay. So one part of my story that I didn't tell you, which will make more sense of how I ended up here. When I was 19 and I had made the decision to not go to school, my parents were terrified. And one thing that they really wanted was to bring somebody in my life to teach me about money. And so they introduced me to this guy, Randy Sonata. And from 19 till, honestly, now, he has been somebody who has been on my side that has taught me about financial literacy, taught me about money, taught me about investing. So everything my relationship with him has definitely, he's groomed me into becoming what I am now. So that is one thing that, now people are starting to hear, but I've had somebody on my side with a financial background for 15 plus years.
So your parents were smart enough to realize you needed some sort of financial mentor.
Yes. Yes. So 100%.
How does one do it? Like, if you have a son who's 19 and doesn't want to go to school, like, how does a parent go about finding a Randy Sonata type mentor for their kid? So my dad met him and Randy started helping my dad with money. So a little bit background on Randy. Randy owns a multifamily office. So they manage multiple families' money. And alongside that, they have a real estate division to their company, a storage unit fund and a lending fund. And so my dad had met him. He started working with him, managing my dad's money, helping him invest. And my dad was so impressed by him that he was like, I've got to introduce my son to you. And the beauty and what I'm incredibly thankful for is Randy very could have well just said, hey, Mike, yeah, cool. Just give me your money and I got it.
thankfully he said, "Hey, dude, I want to work with you on this. Like, I want to offer as much as I can to show you how to do this." Really took like a stewardship role more than anything, which I'm real thankful for. But that was, my dad found him, had a good experience with him, and forced me to meet him.
So were you investing in real estate along the way while you were making money as a skateboarder, or did you reach a point afterward where you went to Randy and said, "Hey, help me figure out how to do this full time"?
So this was my exact strategy for anybody who wants to know. I wasn't making a ton of money in the beginning. So the very first thing that we did was set up a budget that would allow me to save cash to deploy towards opportunity. And when you're making 70 grand a year in California, that's cool, but that goes by quick. So the very first thing was giving myself the ability to even have cash to put forward. Once I got to the point of knowing where my money was going, we started looking at ways on how I could increase my income so that I could have more money to put into things. So the first 3 years was me building ultimately my income so that I could deploy into investments. Once I got to the point of having some money, then it went into, if there was opportunity into real estate, it was going into real estate. But if there wasn't at that point, dude, we were using stocks and bonds to ultimately hold my money until I could find opportunity to put it into. And then at that point, if it wasn't real estate, it was investing in myself, brands I was starting, or other brands that I could influence the outcome of my investment. So on the real estate side specifically, that's probably been about 11 years, maybe 12 years.
And what specifically, what type of real estate were you investing in?
Storage units, and then on the debt side, multifamily apartments.
Okay. And were these your own deals, or were you investing alongside others, like in syndications?
So they both of their offerings are funds. So I was investing in their fund, which was made up of, currently it's about eight properties on the storage side, and then the lending side it's a significant amount. But that was me investing as a limited partner on their deals. And
then bring us up to date to where you are now. What's your role in real estate as an investor?
So I started a company called Commune Capital, and I took the approach that we took with St. Archer, except I had learned so much with St. Archer. So I had this idea of this company I wanted to start that was ultimately built to help athletes prepare for their future. And me just feeling really fortunate to have a Randy come into my life, teach me about money, teach me how to take control, invest. I wanted to offer that to other friends of mine. And so I came up with this idea. I built out this business plan, this deck, and I was going to do it as a real estate fund. The thing I did not know was how a fund operated or worked. I didn't have experience, but I understood how syndications work. I didn't know a fund. So I brought Randy my business plan and deck, expecting him to take the same approach he took with St. Archer, showing us what to do, prepping us, and then setting us out to go do it. And with this one, he looked at it and kind of looked at me and said, "Hey, would you want to have the conversation about doing this one together?" And so that ended up leading to us creating a partnership to build this brand. And then Commune was formed. So the three guys who I had been investing in for a little over a decade now are now my partners in this one, which has been a huge blessing. So this is now their third fund, my first fund on the GP side. But it's a little different than just an investor. I'm treating this thing as a hybrid of everything I've learned and built with building a brand, and then we also have the investment arm of it. So it's exciting, but there's some things that feel very normal, and then there's other things that I had to learn from doing it this way.
If I understand you right, Commune Capital basically runs a fund that is investing in different types of real estate assets?
So the fund that is currently open in Commune is specific towards multifamily and mixed use.
So explain to us What is the difference then between a syndication and a fund?
So a syndication is the simplest place. A syndication is raising money for a specific project. So if I locked up, let's say, a 40-unit project in LA, I would get the project, I would go out, I'd raise money for that one building, and then that would be my syndication. And then I would look for another building, call it a 70-unit in Santa Barbara. Then I would go raise money again, either with some of those investors or all new ones in that project. So it's a per project basis. A fund has multiple projects inside of one investment. So you are diversifying holdings and ultimately a return. So your return is reflected off the valuation of multiple projects.
Okay. So how do you work that then? Because I'd imagine you're raising investors' money as you go along and find new opportunities. Whereas with a syndication, you've got one asset you're going to take down. You've got a specific date. You raise the money. Everybody's invested in that asset. How do you work it with the investors and bringing in investor money into a fund?
So let's say our first project, right, when we opened, you open your fund that has a share price value that is reflected on the purchase of the asset you're going to make, raise capital, and then you close. And then every closing, the next opening will be a new valuation. And so that basically puts the person who came in the beginning, if somebody came in, let's call it 2 years down the line, they're not buying it in the same share price. So you're ultimately always making a return based on the price you came in at. So I would say closings that the new opening has a new share price reflected.
All right, thanks for explaining that. So talk about some of the assets that you're acquiring in the fund.
So we have a project that we actually just completed. It was a smaller deal, 34 units in Long Beach. It was a deep value add. So we bought a rundown Class C property, and now we are getting about a Class A minus comp. So significant value add. We're leasing up now. We're at about 60% leased up. And so we're looking at probably having everybody having 100% occupancy, hopefully in the next 6 weeks. And then we're looking into a refi and then move on to another project, hopefully out there. And then we have another project in Cleveland, right outside of Cleveland, that is a pretty big project. It was a foreclosed Sears building that we bought the building along with the parking lot, which totaled about 23 acres. That we are scraping and developing on. So that will be a mixed-use project, about 15,000 square feet of retail, and almost 400 units of living above it.
Okay, that's a pretty huge development.
It's a size. It's a big one. Yeah, the Long Beach one was a pretty small one. This one's a pretty big one.
And it's interesting because you're basically taking an old Sears building, and when you say scraping it, basically demolishing it. Yep. You said 15,000 new square footage of retail and then 400 apartment units, huh?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Talk about that. I mean, what a massive undertaking. What's your role in all of that?
That's a good question. So our role, we partnered up with a developer that we have partnered with the past on the storage side. And they found the opportunity, got it under contract, and brought it to us to ultimately partner with. Our responsibility in this project is raising the capital and then overseeing the finances of the project. Their responsibility is developing it, and then we will also help with the marketing side of it as well.
Nice. And where is that located?
Richmond Heights, right outside of Cleveland in Ohio.
Is Commune Capital, is that where you're spending most of your time now, or are you still working on some of the other businesses?
No, Commune is where I spend all my time now. So St. Archer, none of us are involved with anymore. Sovereign is a skateboard and apparel brand that I own with partners, and that one is pretty much operating without me at this point. Whereas the time I do give is pretty minimal. And then, it is pretty much Commune. And then I have a company I do with a friend of mine called Avni It's in the digital marketing side that my friend Eric runs.
Just going back to the syndication versus fund model, why does it make more sense to have a fund that you can dip into each time you have a new project you want to finance, as opposed to just raising money separately and having a specific group of investors for the Sears development and a separate group of investors for the Long Beach units that you rehabbed?
This is I think the forever argument is which one is better. I don't think it's a which one is better. I think it's what you're more comfortable with. For us, there's two reasons why we like the fund. It gives us the ability to diversify more than anything. We're able to participate in different markets that our bulk or all of our investors get to participate in together. I like that aspect. The second thing is what I'm creating and hoping to create is more than just an investment. I want to create something that teaches people about investing, that people get to invest with, that ultimately is a community beyond the investment. And one thing that ultimately led me to do a fund is I don't want people to be involved with Commune that are seeing potentially a different return than someone else. So if I have a property that's killing it, I don't want a group of investors to go, Commune is the best thing ever. And then if we had a project that wasn't performing, I don't want other people going, yeah, I'm investing in Commune and it sucks. I was a little concerned that there'd be a challenge to the message or the experience with investors if it was done that way. And so we went with the fund. People still have the ability to ride alongside the fund. So if somebody, just wants to be involved in one project, they can come alongside or on a sidecar to the fund. But it's at a higher investment from a minimum standpoint. Our minimum investment for our fund's $100,000. That wouldn't totally be enough to ride alongside, but you have the ability if you're looking to deploy a little bit more capital.
I see. So you're spreading the risk by having the different assets in one fund with all your investors. You're spreading out the risk between all those different assets.
Yes, and then you can get to a point, and I'm gonna start by saying the finance or the numbers. This is not what I do for the business, so I am not the financial expert. But with the storage fund, there's enough properties in there that they've been able to start using a line of credit against them that you can only do in a fund structure. You can't do that on a syndication structure. So ultimately, you can get to a point where you don't need to raise capital anymore.
So you can get a line of credit on the equity that you have. If you have it in a fund structure.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
That's interesting. Okay.
Yeah.
We're going to wrap it up here, but I have a couple more questions for you.
Okay.
First of all, are you achieving one of your stated goals, which is helping other athletes become financially responsible and educated and get invested into real estate?
So because it is so new, I'm going to say that we are making steps at accomplishing it. To have somebody completely financially free in a year, 14 months, that's a different story. So from the athletes we have involved, from them having money now invested in real estate, learning about their finances, how to prepare, even on the emotional side, yes, we are absolutely helping in create that ultimate goal. But I think just because of how new it is, we have more to go.
And what is your overall message to any athletes who are listening or people who are in a very specific profession, whether it be, sports or television or movies, but they have a very specific talent and a very specific well-paying niche, but it's not the type of profession that's going to last them through the rest of their lives. What would your message be to those people? So
my message is ultimately you have a window in which you're of influence. And when opportunity comes to you that most people don't take advantage of because they believe it'll be there forever. And so you have this scenario where, all of the sudden their TV gig or their sports gig ends and they have done nothing to prepare. And all of a sudden they start scrambling to try to figure it out. Well, that is, once the wheels have fallen off, it's pretty hard to get them back on while the car's still moving. So our ultimate message is you need to start planning for the future while your career's still on the way up. Don't wait until it starts kind of heading towards a downturn to go, oh my gosh, I need to start planning. So the younger you are to start, applying these techniques, start participating, the better your transition is going to be once it ends. And ultimately, I'm using myself as the example. This is, my career ended very abruptly, and I went from making money to not making money overnight. And thankfully, I didn't have to go get a job. And a lot of my friends when that happened, were put into survival mode. So it's more just being responsible, taking control of your money, opportunity, and preparing for your future.
Mikey, how would people get a hold of you if they wanted to do so?
If anybody wants to contact me directly, probably email is the best way, just Mikey at Commune Capital. If you want to follow our social or my social, it's just Mikey Taylor. Our company's Commune Capital on Instagram. And you can pretty much get a hold of us through any of those platforms as well.
Great. Well, Mikey, it's been really interesting hearing about your success as a skateboarder and how you realized that you needed to have that next thing that's going to, take you beyond skateboarding, and how you transitioned into entrepreneurism and now real estate. And I appreciate the distinction you drew between syndications and funds, and sharing a little bit about what you're working on now. So it's been a really fun and interesting conversation. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Brian. Appreciate it.
I want to thank everybody for listening to this episode. I'm your host, Brian Hamrick from Hamrick Investment Group, and you can find out more about me by going to higinvestor.com. That's higinvestor.com. And you can also ask questions and join us on Facebook by going to RPOA, Rental Property Owner and Real Estate Investor Podcast. This episode was sponsored by Green Property Management, managing everything from single-family homes to apartment complexes in the West Michigan area. Find out more at greenpropertymgt.com.
You've been listening to the Rental Property Owner and Real Estate Investor Podcast, brought to you by the Rental Property Owner Association. You can find out more at rpoaonline.org. If you enjoyed this podcast, please go to iTunes to subscribe, rate, and review.